Hello again. So today we're going to be talking about how to implement this hierarchy workflow in Git, or better yet, GitHub. So how do we make these connections between these individual repositories? So every repository is a repository in their self right. So it's not like it's just a workspace, or one repository is just a copy of another repository. That's not the case. All repositories in Git are their own, in their own right, their own repository. So even though that's the case, we still sometimes like to think of repositories being positioned relative to another. And so we've got upstream and downstream repositories. So in this hierarchy structure, for instance, these leaders are downstream from the main repository, or these team members are downstream from the team leaders, and team leaders are upstream from the team members, and so on. Now, if we're taking things from the perspective of repository B, then we are pushing our changes upstream and pulling changes from downstream. So if we want our changes that we've made to repository B to go to repository A, we need to push them to repository A. If repository A has had some changes from some other developer, then we need to pull them into our repository. Now, so what typically happens is you have sort of, you sometimes think of the remote repository for your local repository as sort of a unit almost, but really they're repositories by themselves. They're not. It's not like the local repository doesn't exist without the remote repository. It just so happens that your local repository is on your computer and the remote repository is on a server. So remote repositories can interact with each other just the same way that a local repository and a remote repository interact with one another. Just to stress this concept. Now, if we want to have that hierarchy structure, this is sort of all the repositories that we'll need at the very bare minimum. So you've got two team member developers, and each of them has their own local repository and then a remote repository. And then you've got your team leaders remote repository, and then it's their local repository. Sorry, that's supposed to say local. And then you've got the main repository up here. So you can see, to get a team member's changes from their local repository, they're going to need to push them to their remote repository, and then the team leader is going to have to pull them in from their remote repository or complete a pull request, which we'll do in GitHub, and then the team member can push them to the main repository. And I put the local repositories in this sort of different style, and that's now just to keep in mind that the other team members cannot see your local repositories. They're just on your computer. Nobody else can see them but you. So how do we construct this in Git? So at the very first, you need to create your original remote repository. This doesn't need to happen in this order, but I just believe this is the most logical, easy way to understand it. So you originally create this remote repository on the server using GitHub, the GitHub site. And then you fork this repository as a developer. You create a fork, which is basically a copy of that repository. And then you need to clone your repository to your local computer. So the fork that you do is creating a remote repository. You need a local repository on your computer to commit to. And now I didn't want to have arrows between the original remote repository and the developer's remote repository like I did in the hierarchy, because remember, these repositories are in their own right, their own repositories. They're not really related to one another. But to make that relationship when you're working, you do what's called is you add a remote upstream repository, and that will create this relationship here between the two repositories. And so that will allow you to synchronize this repository here with that repository, not the other way around. If they want to do that, if your team leader wants to do that, they can do it themselves by pulling from your repository, or they can configure you to be a upstream repository as well, which I don't think is a very good idea. Alright, so I'm going to go pretty fast here, and I'm only going to do the bare minimum in getting this workflow working in Git, because otherwise we'll be here all day, and I just prefer making videos like that, getting right into the action. So we're going to create again all these repositories, except I'll only make one set of green, not two. There's no need for two. So I'm going to have one team member called team and one leader called leader. So first thing we've got to do is we have to create the original remote repository, or this main repository here. We need to create this guy. So here is, just take you to GitHub. Here is GitHub. I'm actually going to use a sort of a less full-featured version of GitHub. It's called gitbucket. In another video I show you how to set up, which is basically just a free version of GitHub Enterprise, which you can run on your own local machine. And I find Gitbucket's pretty really good for teaching and learning, because it's a bit simpler than GitHub. It doesn't have all the sort of bells and whistles that you're not going to use anyway. So you have a root user, default user for Gitbucket. So we'll sign in as root. And I just need to configure something that other users are also allowed to create their own accounts. So I just need to click allow here. So if you want to check out a bit more about Gitbucket, then check out the video I have about Gitbucket. So let's log back in as root, and we'll create the main repository. So I'm just going to call it main. And the main repository, which creates our release software. Okay, cool. And I'll initialize with a readme. Always initialize with a readme, because just like if a tree falls in a forest and no one's around to hear it, doesn't really make a sound. So if you check out a repository with no readme file or no files whatsoever, do you really check it out? How can you tell? It's the repository paradox for you. And here we go. So we have the readme. Now in another browser, I'm using two different browsers because I want to be logged on with two different users at the same time. And if you're just using one browser, then you're only logged on as the one user, and it was very confusing for me when I was trying to make this video. So we got to, if I refresh now, I should have a menu to create a new account now, which I do. And now I'm going to create the leader account. So it's just going to be leader, and that's all you need to do to create an account in Gitbucket. It's much more simpler than GitHub, where I would have to verify email accounts and all that stuff. So log on as leader. Alright, cool. Now leader as it is right now cannot access this guy here, which is like the main repository here. He can't push there. He'd have to do a pull request, and the root user would have to pull his requests in. So that's what pulling is. Pulling refers to this guy pulling stuff out of here, which is not what we want. We want this guy to be able to push, so get the changes himself into this repository. So let's do that. So we just go into settings and collaborators, and we'll just add leader. So it pops up too. And that's all there is to it. And now I never have to worry about the root user again. I'm going to sign out because he doesn't actually exist. It was just merely to create this repository. See, there's no root user or anything like that. Alright, cool. So now we need that team, the team user. So on the right I'm going to have the leader, and on the left I'm going to have the team. How's I've set it up? Oh no, sorry. I'm going to have it the other way around, just to confuse you. Now it's just that I've already got my command prompts configured that way. So on the left you can see I've got leader, and on the right I've got member. So just some folders I've got set up ready to work in. So so left is leader, right is is that right yet? Left is leader, right is member. So you need to create a member account now, and you can probably guess what I'm going to enter in for all these. Done. Alright. Now, we can see here, we logged on as leader. Yes, we are. Yeah, so here we can see we're logged on as leader. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create this guy. So this is going to be a fork of the main repository. So that's how you create another remote repository, which is almost just like a copy of some other remote repository. So let's do that. So we'll find we have to find the roots main repository. So the way it works in Gitbucket and GitHub is the next thing here is the user. So I'm just navigating to root and his main repository, and then I just click here to create a fork. Sweet, done. And now you can see I'm in leader main. I'm not in root main anymore, I'm in leader main. So leader has his own repository called main, which is a fork of root main. And now I want the member to have his own fork of leader main. So I'll just go gitbucket leader. Doesn't like it if you have a / on the end. Alright. And I'll click on his repository main, and I'll create a fork. So just check that again. Yep, leader main and fork. Perfect. So we'll go back to our PowerPoint. What we have is we've got this repository, and this repository. Now we need this guy and this guy. So these are both local repositories. So they're located on computers. So to get these local repositories, we need to do what's called a clone in Git. So we need to clone them into our local machine, which we do on the command prompt. So let's do that. So we just grab the address. So this guy again was the leader. So git clone, and then enter in the address. And then we do the same for member. Now, if I do a dir here, I've got a folder called main, which I'll cd into. Do the same here. Alright, and now I can do git status and git status. So your branches are up to date. So let's say I'm the team member and I want to change the README file somewhat. So we're just going to work with the README file today. So I want to write something like, I want more made by member or whatever. It's not important. Now if I do a git status, I can see that the README has been modified and I want to commit my changes. So I'm just going to skip a feature of Git called the staging area, whereby you sort of arrange what your commit's going to look like before you actually do it, but you can skip that step by doing a commit and then -a. So credit update. And now, so what have I done? What I've done is I've committed into this local repository, but I need to push my changes to the remote repository to get those changes to appear on gitbucket or to other, your repositories which other developers can see. So let's do that now. So to do that, we do git push. The remote branch is called, the remote repository is called origin by default, and my current branch is called master. And if you remember the password for member, it was just member. Username and password was member. There we go. Now, if I go on to, if I go back to the members repository, see, made by member. So that's the change that I want to get. I want to get to the main repository, the main repository, if you will. I want to get it. I want to get it that change from. So right now that it's here the change, but I want it to get all the way up here. But basically, I need to get it to the team leader, and he's going to get it to there if he likes it. So we're going to make a pull request that we're requesting that the leader pull in changes from our repository, because remember, we can't push to the leader, he can only pull in changes to us. So let's do that. So to do a pull request, let's go and pull requests. New pull request. And you need to change this. We don't want to do a pull request to here. We want to do it to there. So right now it's pointing here, the pull request. So you just go edits, and we want it to be leader main. There we go. And now we can enter in stuff here. Just credit issue. This. And here's a comment you can leave, and you can comment on the pull request, so you can get feedback from the leader, which I'll show you in a second anyway, and you can discuss your changes. So this is an update on the credits. Create pull request. and see in here, you can see the address here too. You can comment on this issue at any time. So now, if we go to the leaders site now, if we refresh this, we now got an outstanding pull request. And we can click on it, and we can also comment. And I can view the changes, so I can see here's entered some spaces and made this change. And so I'm not going to bother. I'll just say, all right, fair enough. Oh, I didn't spell all right. Oh well. Okay, fair enough. Spelling is not the best. There we go. And now I can merge this pull request, and that will bring the changes into the remote repository. And now there's no longer any outstanding pull requests. So if I go back to the repository, there's no longer any notifications here. Now let's keep in mind what's happened. So the changes are in here, but they're not in the leader's local repository yet. So let's get them into the local repository. Remember, we need to pull in the changes to our local repository. So let's do that now. There's no way of pushing because our computer isn't in GitHub, our computer is not available to the internet. However, with running a local server, it may be possible, but we won't go there. For now, we'll just have to assume that if you want changes into your local repository, you're always going to have to pull them in yourself. So let's do that. So I'm in leader. So if I just do a git pull. One file changed, 4 insertions, 1 delete. So now if I go into the leader's README, hopefully it's been updated. So there we go, made by member. So now it's up to date. So what happens though if the leader makes some changes to the README? So let's do that. And we'll commit those changes. So here's leader. We'll do credit for the leader. Need another M. Here we go. And then we'll push. And leader. Alright, so now what's happened is that the leader has pushed some changes from his local repository to here, yet the team member, he doesn't yet have those changes in his remote repository. So your remote repositories, they're your own repository. It's not like that the leader has control over your remote repository, and when he pushes stuff to his remote repository, it automatically gets pushed to yours. That's not the case. So we need to pull in changes from his remote repository into ours. And this is not something that you can do that easily through the GitHub and Gitbucket interface. In fact, I'm not sure that you even can do it but you can do it on the command line. And so we're going to talk again about this upstream sort of notion that repository A is upstream from repository B. So we want this repository here, well, not actually this repository when we go and do it, but we just want to make the association that this repository is upstream from this guy here. And so once you understand what you're trying to do, it's much easier to find it on GitHub. So on the GitHub internet site, so here we've got about configuring a remote for a fork. So this is where this is the information we first need. So if we go into our member, just minimize this, get rid of some of this stuff, keep him on the right side. So if I do a git remote, you can see that the remote repository I have is called origin. So wait, I might. And if I put verbose on, you can see that where the fetch and the push are going to. So now what we need to do is we need to configure another remote repository that's an upstream remote. So we can do that by using this command. So git remote add upstream, and then we enter in the location of the team members main. Oh, sorry, the leaders main. We enter in the location of the leaders main, which is here. There we go. Now if we do the same command we did before, we've now got upstreams added to our workspace, if you will. So to sync our fork, we can now do these commands. So we can do a git fetch upstream. Do that. Sorry, we just need to merge our master with the upstream. So to do that, we just go git merge upstream and master. And now what we've done is effectively, so it's a bit hard to follow, but really what has happened is we haven't synced this repository with this, we've synced this guy with this, and now if we want to get changes into here, we need to push them, because remember that we can't that this guy can't push changes to here, and we can't really pull them in using Git or GitHub, but we've got control over this repository down here, so we can get the changes from here into here and then push them into there. So let's do that now. So, oh, that's the leader. And we've got member, and done. So now our, if I open up these guys, they both have the same, they're both the same, so they've both been synced, so everything's synced now. And now just the very last thing that we want to do is we want to get the changes from the leaders repository into the main remote repository. So to do that, that's a lot easier, because the leader can push directly to the remote repository. So how about we first did what we did for this guy and configure that this guy is upstream from here. So let's do that now. So if I can remember, it was git remote add upstream, and then I just enter in the address of the root main, which is here. And now we'll check that that's worked. Perfect. And now let's just try a git push upstream. So I think that will work. I'll just type in my credentials again. So that was leader. Here we go. And now let's see if this has been updated. There we are, done, updated. So that's how to get this whole workflow going. So we've done it. So it's only a bit complicated because there's so many users, and typically you'd just be worried about if you're just this guy, you only need to sync your local repository here with this guy if there's some changes in here you want, and perform pull requests. And similarly here, if you just be looking at the pull requests coming in and then pushing upstream if you wanted to. So if we tried to do a push upstream from here, we tried to push to here, it wouldn't work because we need to know our oh no, sorry, it wouldn't work at all because he's not a collaborator of here. So even if we had the team leader's credentials, we still wouldn't be able to push upstream to here. Thanks for watching. I know it was a bit sort of hard to follow at times, but if you go back and watch it again and you just understand how these repositories are interacting with each other, then you won't have any problems. So just focus on grasping the concepts of remote repositories before you try and start using Git, because otherwise it's very hard to understand all the stuff I was doing. But once you realize that these repositories can act any way they want, like I could have these guys interacting the same way. I can mumble jumble these arrows however I want to in Git. You've got all that flexibility. It's not like they all have to point to a pyramid sort of hierarchy style. That doesn't have to happen at all. It can be all over the place. This is just one workflow that you can do. There's infinitely many. So thanks for watching. Till next time.